July 2005. Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented releases in Japan, followed nearly half a year later in November of 2005 for the West, and lastly in PAL regions in February of 2006. By the time this released, the age of horror was more or less dead. The war between Call of Duty and Medal of Honor was on the rise. Resident Evil 4 has already released and redefined the survival horror genre to be more action-oriented. It seemed people were over the age of traditional survival horrors. Tank controls and fixed camera angles were viewed with ire, and anything daring to have a slightly slower pace than that of Resident Evil 4 just wouldn't be tolerated. The PlayStation 2 on top of this was standing in the shadow of a new console release just a year away, so lifetime sales of Fatal Frame 3 would not have long to accumulate. As a result, in the West, Fatal Frame 3 only managed to net about half the amount of sales of Fatal Frame 2. Possibly in response to these horrendous sales, this would be the last Fatal Frame game to get a physical release in the West, with some other Fatal Frame games simply not coming out at all. Although some chance for the series still remained in Japan, where Fatal Frame 3 launched with even greater sales than Fatal Frame 2. But Fatal Frame 3 truly deserved more than it got. It's my firm belief that Fatal Frame 3 just came out at a time when the audience wasn't there for it. Even to this day, it is easy to find sealed copies of this game on a store shelf. In fact, mine was sealed prior to my playthrough for this video. 12 years after its release, and new copies are still available for purchase. While the game incorporates almost all of the same mechanics as the last two games, it is such a slick playing game, there's no way I can truly see this as somehow worse than the first Fatal Frame. But it may be on par with it. Just like the last few games, you navigate traditional Japanese houses, taking out ghosts with your camera obscura, collecting documents and sound bites, as well as journal entries that fill in the history of the land and the specters you come across. There's a good emphasis on puzzles, but battle is even more front and center than before. Thankfully, this shift to being a bit more action-focused does nothing to detract from the amazing atmosphere of the game. The area you have to explore is much bigger than before, but not a lot of it feels too varied. If you have played Fatal Frame 1 and 2, you will recognize a lot of the areas in this game, and even some of the characters. Even though much of the story will be filled in the same way as the last two games, Fatal Frame 3 takes a different narrative approach, having you change between 3 different characters to play different parts of the game. This split storyline makes this game possibly the hardest to fully piece together, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the deepest. Far from it, in fact. While putting the game together will take a lot of explanation, you will realize not too many things are actually being explained. They are simply just harder to explain. Hands down, Fatal Frame 3 is the best looking game in the trilogy, but it comes at a cost. The final boss battle of the game really seems to push the system's limits to its breaking point, and this will be the only part of the gameplay I talk about with any sort of depth. In the last battle, the frame rate slows to a single-digit crawl due to all the visual effects and sounds going on at once. This part wouldn't have frustrated me too much if it weren't for the need to make quick decisions. During this battle, you enter a kind of bubble where a ghost spawns. This ghost can spawn right next to you, and being touched by them will instantly kill you, booting you back to the main menu and making you have to reload, so you will need to escape fast. Unfortunately, acting fast is impossible due to the aforementioned frame rate, so death is generally unavoidable. When not simply dying, this part would actually freeze my system with regularity. All in all, this took me an hour to complete like this. It is because of this last battle, I downgrade the overall experience of playing Fatal Frame 3 to only being on par with Fatal Frame 1 and not above it. Outside of this, it's a much better game. But we all know how Fatal Frame games go at this point. So let's get right into making sense of what I'm sure is another confusing and relatively hidden storyline. As stated earlier, Fatal Frame 3 has you jumping between 3 different characters. Without a doubt, the main character here is Rei Kurosawa. Before the game even starts, we see a flashback to a car accident. Rei approaches, and in the overturned car, her fiancé, Yu Asoyu, lies dead. We next flash forward to Rei alongside her assistant Miku as she explores the Kuze shrine, which she suspects to be haunted. While her belief of its haunted nature is waning, she captures a picture, and in the picture she sees Yu. This moment is where we first see that Rei is the Tormented, as spoken of in the title of the game. This is the moment where we first see the effects of a curse that has been affecting Rei since her fiancé's death. So what is the curse? The curse Ray is now a victim of is referred to as the Tattooed Curse. Although it's never actually called this in-game, this is the name the community has given it, and it fits quite well. The curse causes her to be whisked away into the Manor of Sleep every time she goes to bed. The Manor of Sleep is the dream world version of the Kuze Shrine, the shrine where she captured a picture of you with her camera. The Manor of Sleep is a place where all the previous victims of the Tattooed Curse also now reside, and a place where the prerequisite for entry is to be the sole survivor of a tragedy. In the Manor of Sleep, victims of the Tattooed Curse are tormented with images of their loved ones, always walking further and further away from them, leading them deeper and deeper into the Manor of Sleep. Propelled by emotion, the victims of the curse will always follow their dead loved ones. Because of this, Ray frequently sees the ghost of her fiancé in the Manor of Sleep, and tries her best to catch up to him, feeling that if she did, she might be able to bring him back from the land of the dead. Every time one awakes from a dream of the Manor of Sleep, a tattoo will grow on their skin that only they can see. Each time they go to sleep, that tattoo grows in size. Due to the nature of the curse, the afflictions and side effects will grow as the days progress, and the line between sleep and reality will begin to blur. All those who have claimed to have gone to the Kuze Shrine in their dreams before have ultimately gone missing. Once one is consumed completely by the tattoo, they are whisked away into the Manor of Sleep, forever, never to be seen again. But Ray isn't the only one visiting the Manor of Sleep. One of our other main characters, Miku Hinasake, who you may remember as the sole survivor of Fatal Frame 1, is now working as Ray's assistant and living in her home. Each night Miku goes to sleep, she too is brought into the Manor of Sleep. Ray and Miku together work to uncover as much information as they can about the Manor of Sleep and the curse that afflicts them, and put a stop to it before they too go missing like all the others. So we know our main characters made it to the Manor of Sleep because they are the sole survivors of a tragedy. But why does the Manor of Sleep exist at all? The Manor of Sleep was formerly a real-world place known as the Kuze Shrine. Now, however, it exists solely in a dream state. So how did it get here? To know this, we must first understand the role of the Tattooed Priestess. The Tattooed Priestess is somebody tasked with making sacrifices to prevent something called the Unleashing from happening and to stop the spread of the Rift. The Rift, in simple terms, is the divide between the land of the living and the land of the dead, and is presented in-game as a large body of water. The Rift gains power from those in the real world struggling with the pain of loss, and who bring that loss into their dreams. To stop the spread of the Rift, that pain must be sealed. The Unleashing is the event when dark forces cross over from the other side of the Rift and spill into the real world, bringing about death, destruction, and miasma. The Tattooed Priestess, once appointed her role, must live her entire life in the Kuze Shrine and undergo 2 rituals to prevent the Unleashing from happening. These 2 rituals are known as the Piercing of the Soul and the Impalement Ritual. Let's start with the former. The Piercing of the Soul ritual involves 2 people known as engravers. Engravers, for lack of a better term, are simply tattoo artists whose job it is to tattoo snake and holly designs into the skin of the Tattooed Priestess to symbolize the pain of loss. The tattoos the engravers commit to the skin of the priestess are believed to contain the pain of all those who come to worship at the Kuze Shrine. This is done so that the living who have experienced loss will not bring that pain of loss into their dreams, as such a pain gives power to the other side of the rift and allows it to spread. Instead, that pain is transferred to the Tattooed Priestess, who will sacrifice herself into an eternal slumber at the shores of the rift and prevent the rift from spreading. Being an engraver doesn't sound like a hard job, but given its spiritual nature, you best believe it comes with no shortage of sacrifice. Much like the Tattooed Priestess, the engravers must also live life contained to the Kuze Shrine. In order to accurately be able to tattoo the pains of others into the Tattooed Priestess, the engravers must first show they adequately understand pain. To do this, the engravers pierce their arms with thorns, they tattoo themselves, and gouge out their eyes, followed lastly by running a rope through their eye sockets and binding the rope around their scalp. The ink they tattoo the priestess with must be harvested from the blood of worshippers, living or dead. This ink is known as the ink of the soul. When an engraver's job is complete, their hands are cut off and they are retired. Next, we'll move on to the second of the Tattooed Priestess's ritualistic expectations, the Impalement Ritual. When the Tattooed Priestess's body is covered in tattoos, she is led by 2 handmaidens to a stone building known as the Chamber of Thorns at the edge of the rift. This is where all Tattooed Priestesses end up. The handmaidens take tattooed stakes and hammer them through the priestess's hands and feet, nailing her to the Chamber of Thorns, where she and the pains of those that have been etched into her skin will rest forever, and the spread of the rift will be stopped. Keep in mind, I said rest here. My wording on this is very specific. The priestess is being put to sleep, not to death. Like most rituals, if the priestess has not managed to make peace with her life before her eternal slumber, the ritual will fail. The pain of others will not be properly sealed, and the rift will gain power, causing the bridge between the land of the dead and the land of the living to erode. In a last-ditch effort, if the priestess fails, her tattooed skin is ripped from her body while she is still alive. Her skinned body is then ferried across the rift as an offering of pain to the other side to temporarily prevent the unleashing. The tattooed skin, on the other hand, is preserved and put on display in the Kuze shrine. So obviously, the last time the ritual was performed, it failed. We know this simply by the existence of the tattooed curse and the Manor of Sleep. So what happened? Say hello to Reika Yukihiro. Reika lived in a village near Kuze shrine. By all accounts, her life was pretty normal. She met a man in her village named Kaname and fell in love. Kaname eventually left to study abroad. During his time away, something tragic occurred, resulting in the deaths of Reika's entire family. Reika was then adopted by the Kuze family. She moved to their shrine and took up their family name. Understanding pain and tragedy all too well, Reika wanted to do everything in her power to prevent others from feeling the kind of pain she did, and so she volunteered herself for the position of tattooed priestess. Reika was then, as per tradition, designated to live in a hanging cage where the only outsider she ever got to see was a woman named Amane Kuze. Amane would be Reika's caretaker until the impalement ritual occurs. The two shared many stories with one another and got along well, but the ritual approached as naturally and as inevitably as was expected. Prior to the impalement ritual, one other ritual must occur. This ritual is performed by the priestess alone. It is necessary for a tattooed priestess to separate her own pains from her body as to not interfere with the sealing of the pains of others, and to be at peace when the time for eternal slumber arrives. To do this, one must etch their own pains into a mirror. When a priestess's body is completely covered in tattoos, they are to break that mirror as a symbolic representation of their altruism and their willingness to separate their body and mind from their own interests. When the mirror is broken, the impalement ritual is to begin. During the impalement ritual, many measures are taken to put the priestess into an eternal sleep. Notice again, I did not say death here. This is very important. Yes, the ritual involves hammering stakes through her hands and feet, but as silly as this sounds, those stakes are so that she does not get up and move around in her slumber. Now I bet you think Reika messes this up, right? Given the series' history, it would be a safe assumption, but nope. Reika is impaled without issue. The real issue comes from Amane, Reika's caretaker from the hanging cell. Through the many stories Reika and Amane swapped, Amane discovered Reika was in love with Kaname. Unbeknownst to Reika, Amane and Kaname were half-brother and sister. Amane grew an attachment to Reika and did not want her to live such a miserable life. Hoping to save her, Amane brought Kaname into Kuze's shrine and straight down into the Chamber of Thorns. At that moment, Amane was found out by somebody named Yashu Kuze. It was Yashu's job to make sure all rituals went off smoothly and the spread of the rift was prevented. Yashu pursued Amane and Kaname to the Chamber of Thorns. As she arrived, Kaname was in the process of waking up his estranged lover Reika. In a violent turn of events, Yashu murders Kaname without a moment's hesitation. Just as this is happening, Reika awakes from her slumber that was supposed to be eternal. The image she sees before her, the first image she sees upon awaking, scars her so deeply that the tattoos on her body spread to the one place a priestess is not supposed to be tattooed. Reika had not completely let go of her pains. The tattoos spread to her eyes and turned them into mirrors, and all the pain that was etched into her body was reflected back into the world, causing an event known as the Unleashing. The Unleashing, as stated earlier, is when the rift spreads and the bridge between the land of the living and dead is dissolved. Yashu tried her best at this moment to seal the manor into a dream, so the rift could not infect anything beyond Kuze's shrine, but she was only partially successful. While she did contain the manor to existing only within a dream, Reika's power was immense enough that she could project that dream into the sleep of those who had lost loved ones and drag them into the manor forever. But not only that, there was a second way to get into the manor. You could also enter the manor if anybody with the tattooed curse so much as dreamt about you. And that's just how another character, Kay, whom we'll talk about shortly, managed to get his way in. So how do we break the curse this time? How do we reverse the Unleashing? Rei and Miku follow their dead loved ones, Yu and Mafuyu, deep into the shrine. Miku unfortunately goes too far and is consumed by the tattooed curse. Before Rei gets too far in, she receives a visit from a man named Kei. Kei was a friend of Yu's and is also the uncle to Mio and Mayu from Fatal Frame 2. Kei explains that Mio has been suffering from the tattooed curse as well, and as she has been following Mayu deeper and deeper into the Manor of Sleep each night, she too is soon to succumb to the tattooed curse. Kei and Rei combine all the research they have and attempt to come up with a plan. Kei proposes they find new tattoo stakes and redo the impalement ritual, and that's exactly what Kei tries. Kei enters the Manor of Sleep and gathers the stakes. He makes it to the Chamber of Thorns and finds out that Reika didn't even lift a finger to create all the evil that we'd seen so far. Reika has been impaled here the whole time, but she doesn't stay that way. Nah, that bitch rips herself right up and traps Kei in the Chamber of Thorns with her. Probably safe to assume now Kei's dead as well. Next, Rei decides to try her luck, and wouldn't you know it, in the lamest way possible, she's successful. Rei makes it to the Chamber of Thorns, and one hell of a boss fight later, Rei defeats Reika with the camera obscura. Nothing really fancy going on here. Following Reika's defeat, Rei puts Reika and Kaname's body on a boat together and sends them across the body of water we know as the Rift. This is a very obvious metaphor to the ferryman, as Reika and Kaname's body is ferried to the other side of the Rift that represents life and death. The tattooed curse ends here. But not before one last goodbye. Among many souls now departing the Manor of Sleep, Rei spots her dead fiancé Yu. She runs to Yu and pleads that she stay by his side. Unwilling to allow Rei to throw her life away, Yu strips the curse from her body and tells her that so long as she lives, so too does a small part of him. Rei awakes to find herself and Miku have been spared from the tattoo curse, both now with the understanding that the dead are only dead if they are forgotten. And to truly honor the loss of a dead loved one, the most noble thing you can do is go forward, to live life and carry their memory with you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Fatal Frame 3. Also, Kei's life is spared, but who cares? They don't even give him screen time here at the end.